Bem-vindo ao MarTech Talks, o podcast da Liminal que lhe traz entrevistas aos líderes de negócio que estão na linha da frente da transformação digital de departamentos de marketing e vendas para que também o seu negócio possa crescer nesta nova era tecnológica. Enquanto especialista em MarTech, a Liminal tem vindo a conseguir melhorar os resultados de marketing e vendas de várias empresas, assegurando as condições para o sucesso dos negócios na nova era digital. Com a Liminal, terá acesso a peritos que farão a análise, desenho e implementação de estratégias e operações de marketing e vendas. Tudo isto suportado por sistemas tecnológicos tais como CRM, automação e analítica de marketing. Crie o seu ecossistema digital de negócios com a Liminal.
Hello and welcome to the second MarTech Talks podcast. Our guest today is Frans Riemersma. Welcome, Frans. So nice to have you at our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to our conversation. The more we talk about MarTech, the better, I think.
That's it. At Liminal, we've been working with Frans and MarTech Tribe for the last couple of years, taking a small part in this huge venture that is the MarTech Landscape, and which we'll be talking about in a minute. Frans is one of the top 10 MarTech influencers in Europe and in the world. For 2 decades, Frans has been designing marketing technology stacks for companies like HP, Adidas, Audi, Unilever, Philips, IKEA, Carlsberg, Volvo, and the list goes on and on. What an amazing experience you've got on your belt, my friend. So he's also a university lecturer on the subject of digital transformation. He founded MarTech Tribe, and now he joined forces with Scott Brinker to deliver the new and updated MarTech Global Landscape. Congrats on that, friends.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a lot of work, but we can't do it with people like yourself. Okay. So thanks to you.
Oh, thank you very much. Regarding the MarTech Landscape, since first published over a decade ago, the number of commercial MarTech solutions mapped on it has expanded exponentially from 150 to almost 10,000 within little less than 10 years, as I said. What sort of opportunities do you think this formidable growth in MarTech solutions brings to a typical SMB company? And also, what advice would you give to business leaders out there on how to take advantage of these opportunities?
Yeah, it's both an opportunity and a threat. You know, it's a threat if you don't dare to dive in, and it's an opportunity if you do. Now, not everybody is tech savvy enough to dive into, so find people that can help you or educate you. But the thing is, you know, every company is not only using more software, they become software. So you can imagine that more and more companies, they have a mobile app. Of course, they have their website that becomes more and more important, you know, adding functions like e-commerce and those kind of things, payments. Then you have the upcoming and rising my websites, like, you know, my portal, etc., which is often homegrown. And from all these touch points, you basically you could say you become a software company. So last week I opened as a keynote my presentation, saying to the people, this morning you woke up and thought you were working for an automotive company. Tonight you will go to bed, know for sure you're working for a software company.
Yeah. Amazing. That's so true.
That's the thing. And I think you need to up your skills. And there are many companies we work together with. And then we see, there's fear, there's uncertainty. And as you pointed out, there are only more and more tools coming up. So to lower maybe the fear, here is a doctor's recipe. I would recommend, you know, try a new tool, and there are a lot of free tools out there, and you don't have to try the big guys only. You can try, especially smaller ones, play around. They have a free trial for just, 10, 15 minutes. Because if you don't understand the tool by then, it's not you, it's maybe the tool. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and this will give you a comfortable feeling. And Well, you just mentioned the fact that we're assessing and validating a lot of tools, and we have now almost 10,000 tools globally, and we do it with people like yourself. And maybe you can confirm, Thiago, but many of those people tell me, wow, that was a lot of work, but I learned a lot. Amazing. And I have a good feeling of what is out there, all those tools, the different flavors. You know what? It's the best education I got in MarTech so far. And funny enough, the last decade, when I work with consultants and I onboard them, the first step is always, check out 100 vendors. And then they always go like, are you nuts? Why? I mean, that's boring. And why should I do it? Just do it, and then a week later they come back and they go like, thank you so much, I learned so much. And you even can see in their attitude, you feel much more secure and safe and clear, and they know what they don't know. And that's the most important part, because MarTech is all about, there's a lot we don't know, and by the time you think you know it, there's new features. So I gave it a shot 5 years ago with 10 students from a university back here. And we went through 2,000 tools and gave up. It's just too many. You couldn't. And then we thought, by the time we are done, and I think back then there were 6,000, maybe 7,000. By the time we're done, we can start all over again because the features changed.
Completely.
Yeah. So this uncomfortable feeling of not knowing everything is something you have to face. It's something, play around, and then you know more than enough. And then you will see suddenly in your meetings internally, but also with sales representatives from software companies, you feel so much more secure. You know what you're talking about. You know what you don't know. You can ask the right questions to fill in the gaps in your knowledge, which is very human and normal, and then take it from there. So especially, not especially SMB companies, also at corporates, I see the same thing. There's a lot of, we're basically overwhelmed by the tsunami of MarTech that came in the last 10 years.
Completely agree. You have to put yourself out there, expose yourself to the discomfort of not knowing and being a foreigner and not being a digital native to all this, explosion of tools. But also it's not about the tool. It's about your mindset as a business leader. It's a development mindset or not.
I like that. You're on the money, because now that you know some tools, you get a better feeling of what is out there, and just leave them, for a couple of nights, and suddenly it will come. I think it automatically comes to you and go like, that is a great tool. I will never use it because it doesn't fit my strategy. Yeah. And that's exactly what you want. The business leaders need to understand, is this a tool I can use or not? Is it serving our strategy or not? And all too often you see that business leaders make one very big mistake. And it's a bold thing to say, I know, I'm sorry, but they're really big C-level people out there that say, I want a fully fledged, seamlessly integrated, future-proof solution. Yes, keep dreaming. That doesn't exist. And it's not that the tool doesn't exist. Maybe, I don't care. But your strategy will change in the next 3 years because there's a pandemic, there is, on a geopolitical scale, something else happening, or competitors arise that suddenly conquer the market because they have AI or what. So don't try to mortgage the future. It's impossible. So always, I have a very simple rule of thumb. If you build your stack, you build your tools, you find your tools, make sure you cover the tools that make money today. Mm-hmm. So you have tools like a CRM, for instance, that makes money for you today. You see your client base, you see your opportunities, cool. And now think of, how does my strategy look like for the next 2 to 3 years, where I will try to distinguish myself from competition. And that's not like 10 new tools, it's maybe 1 or 2 features, or maybe a module from one of those CRMs or tools you have already, and then take it from there. And of course, you can experiment with new tooling, AI-driven. I'm not stopping you there. You can still do the doctor's recipe I told you, right. And I'm very much encouraged to play around and experiment. But to really make value out of MarTech, business value, make sure that it covers your current business model, the way you make money today, and the next 2 to 3 years. And beyond that, you cannot think, you cannot, or you have a crystal ball. Mm-hmm. Well, I haven't seen one, but it's impossible to know what's happening in the next 2 to 3 years.
it's so important, that concept of the business model and the future that you have envisioned for it, being at the center of all the decisions you have regarding technology, because it's not really about digital transformation, it's about transformation. Digital transformation is an ongoing process which will never end.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated by what you just said. I would like to learn how you make that link. How can you make that translation between, the strategy and technology? Because I sense often, and I would like to learn from you, the fear of decision. So making a decision and say, yes, it's a great tool, we're not going to use it because it's not fitting our bill. And is that something you see in your daily practice?
As advisors and consultants to our customers, we've reached that same conclusion many, many times. And it's hard, because it's even harder for the customers, the clients who are paying to make that experiment. But at the end of the day, you have learned which way not to go. And that is so precious, because if you've learned that lesson before your competition, you're one step ahead of them.
And that's a very important point. That's another question I receive often from clients, where they say, yeah, but what you are advising is, putting the basics in place, putting the stuff in place for the current business model in the next 3 years. But will we be ahead of competition? We need AI. We need an AI-driven CDP or whatever magic word they're using. And I go like, if you have this in place, you will outsmart them, outgrow them in the next 3 years, beyond. But first have the basics in place. And what I often see is a collection of software rather than a stack. They have not been integrated yet. There's no plan behind. There's no customer data model.
True.
There is no marketing architecture behind it. There's not even alignment with IT. If you ask IT, what is the policy? They normally say, we have one, but it's in my head. Yeah. Even big corporates. And then by all means, make sure you have that somehow nailed down, and not in every detail. It's more like, guardrails to explain, this is our MarTech governance structure. This is when we onboard and offboard a system. And this is what you need, as a system of record, a tool that helps us with the current business model. And this is tools of innovation. You play around, pick and choose, as long as you comply with, legal terms.
That's it.
Legal, like privacy, GDPR.
Yeah. So, what a great, chat this was, and thinking about the Portuguese market, and we've also seen a great growth in the number of MarTech vendors here in Portugal. And we now have more than 120 solutions of marketing and sales technologies made in Portugal. It's a well-known fact that Portugal, despite being a small country and even economy, has an amazing track record of innovation, and technological state-of-the-art startups. For instance, we outrank all the countries in Southern Europe in the number of startups valued above $1 billion. Unicorns like Feedzai, Talkdesk, OutSystems, Farfetch. And what I would like to know is, thinking about the Portuguese MarTech software houses and makers, innovators, what do you think is most notable in our own landscape?
Thanks for asking. As you know, we have a big database of 10,000 vendors, software vendors, and we know where their headquarters sit. So there are 120 residing in Portugal. And we did a little bit of research, of course, in preparation of the podcast. And we see that, relatively speaking, there's a lot of commerce and sales tech, as well as management tech, which is more like project management type of stuff and talent management. So that's really striking. Maybe you have ideas why that is the case. And what we also see is that they have a similar amount of social and relationship type of tools. So we're talking about customer success, CRM, social publishing, but less, relatively a small piece is content and experience, which is a really hardcore MarTech area. So I'm not sure why that is. I was thinking, I can imagine that maybe in Portugal, people like, to emphasize and streamline the way we collaborate and have a sales focus. So that's why we have commerce and sales tech and management tech, collaboration tooling out there, but less in content and experience. And that's striking because content and experience is not only, I think, becoming the future, but so after CDPs have been adopted, I think then we know what our clients and leads are doing across all our touch points. We also want to talk back, with relevant content, snackable content. So I think content becomes very important. And especially here in Europe, we have this challenge of many different languages, and many different strategies per country. And there's much less in the States. So I was expecting from a European country more content, a type of tools, content driven, and they're great tools out there. Zoom Guide, I don't know if you've seen that one, AI driven story writing. It's fantastic. But yeah, I see other tools like Unbabel, the translation. Oh, it's so cool. And or Planless, the one for projects. All three I just named are AI driven, and it's really state of the art. And I think that's really a great next move. So if I tell you about these differences compared to Europe, compared to the world, what do you think?
Yes, it was surprising to me when we started working on this Portuguese MarTech Landscape almost 2 years ago, the sheer number of companies doing that. Also, we have, a very innovative mindset in what entrepreneurial, in this new generation of entrepreneurs who are already, who have an engineering background, okay? And they've been also seeing these opportunities. And probably, the scale has to be bigger, has to be greater. The scale of these companies. So that's why I mentioned the experience with our own unicorns. None of them, purely a MarTech startup, but they understood that in order to compete around the world, you need to have, a faster pace strategy and a greater organization. And this is what I think for our MarTech companies in Portugal, we would be, it will be of value to them, to grow, not just, finding the gap in what Portuguese MarTech landscape exists, but, finding the way to scale it outside of Portugal.
Yeah, and then you're touching upon a challenge that you see in Europe in MarTech is the scale. So we have a lot of countries. So your home market is not necessarily big. Maybe Germany, France, UK, of course, but then those are the bigger countries. So that is normally a hurdle, and it's much to be learned from indeed Farfetched and OutSystems and TalkDesk, those companies. How do you do that? And then again, there's another phenomenon that's very interesting. So there's a long tail of MarTech, right? So the head is around 500 tools, and then 9,500 are smaller ones. And we had some conversations, Scott Brinker and myself, about this, and we basically could link, we thought that the creators economy, so many people that are just digital nomads, digital natives, that think, I don't need a big company. I don't need to be stock listed. I don't need to have an IPO. I have a brilliant income, no boss. This is great, and maybe I don't need to scale. So what I think Shopify calls in e-commerce mom and pop stores, maybe there is some phenomena like mom and pop software. I don't know. And there are people that say, I don't need a big company. So I think that this aspect of the creators economy, the gig economy, is also out there, where you have smaller companies and you don't need to grow and you don't need to scale.
Yeah, that's great. So thinking about these Portuguese MarTech vendors that are now in the early stages of a go-to-market strategy, friends, what would be the best roadmap for them to conquer a worldwide market that is dominated, mainly by US brands?
Yeah, it's coming back to the home market, right? So if you have a big homogeneous market, it's a lot easier to scale. So, and this is one of the things I discussed with Jonathan from Artito, a Belgian company. They have 4 languages, right, officially in their country, or 3, but a bunch. And the thing is that it gives a tremendous advantage in how you set up your tool, because you have to have your database ready for multilingual. And I'm not only talking about the content that your clients put in there, but also the labels of your software. So those 2 aspects, it's something, maybe trivial, but that's one of the many examples that can slow you down. They now have something very scalable, very robust. But imagine a company in the US starting at the same time, not having to conquer those hurdles. They can scale up more easily and they have a bigger base, but then they have the problem of, okay, how do you conquer Europe? So it's a double-sided type of challenge. So I would say, yeah, one of the strengths is, multilingual, multi-strategy, multicultural, currency, multi-legal, maybe even, because yes, we have a European Union, but not everything is synchronized in terms of legal. So, and that's a big challenge. Make sure you get that in place. And in the case of Portugal, I think Spain is a very similar market, and then maybe you conquer France, Italy, and maybe that's the approach. Another one could be you go to UK and try to establish something there. I've seen some Norwegian companies do that with great success. So they first had some clients in their own home market, but then moved to the UK, opened an office there, because UK is the biggest MarTech market in Europe, just so we know. And it's also one of the stepping stones for many American companies to conquer Europe. So that might be also a strategy. I'm just telling you, and echoing of all the stuff I see happening. I'm not sure if it helps.
Yeah, but it's great advice. Yeah, you've said, and I completely agree with you, that the history of the development of MarTech has mainly 4 stages. Coming from the first decade where CRM, and it was all about having clients data in one place, to a second decade. When it was all about marketing automation and having leads, all information of a prospect in one place. And now we are in the era of data, big data. We don't talk about big data. That's further proof that we are on that era. It's normal. And CDPs, customer data platforms, coming to place. And probably, these are my thoughts on that, maybe substituting the CRM category in the near future. I don't know, probably. And you've also said that the next decade, the 4th era of MarTech, will be all about content and making sure that we customize content to each of our customers' unique contexts, right? So for a company that is now on the early stages or stage of MarTech, using the basic tools from a CRM, how can they leapfrog from this stage into this 4th stage that you mentioned, using automation, data, content, experience technology?
That's a very good question. Yeah, it starts with CRM. You need to have an idea of what your client is doing. And you said maybe CDPs will replace CRM, or maybe CRM will reinvent itself. So the first stage was I think the first CRMs just replaced the Excel sheet, because that's the very, very first CRM everybody starts with. And then your next step is a real CRM. But it's okay, maybe it's just a Rolodex on steroids initially. So then, but the CFO wants, sales forecasting, because that's what the investors or the board or the owners want. And then you go into more opportunity management and funnel management. So then you get your reinvented type of CRM, and CRM is now also becoming very important because of first-party data. So I think CRM will reinvent itself and renew itself. And by the way, we see this with all kinds of technologies. So CMS reinvents itself with headless, it's amazing. And the same is now spreading into headless CDP, headless e-commerce. So yeah, this reinvention of these categories is happening all the time. So I think CRM is the number one. Second is marketing automation, your lead management. Very important. And I think the CDP era is, and you probably will see similar things happening, and by all means share that with me in your practice, is that with CDP, we're really trying to understand the client. What on earth are they trying to do with their product? And what on earth are they doing and understanding when we talk to them, communicate with them by all different channels? Because frankly, we don't have a clue. And I think this CDP era is really the era of marketing, because in the core, marketing is really understanding the client, qualitative and quantitative data. And it's the first time you can connect your gut feeling to data and the other way around, and then say, okay, this is what our client really wants. And there's a simple thing that I always advise. I teach at business schools and universities and say, please create a persona. And the first question is, isn't that outdated? Maybe, but it's your exercise for you to understand, how do I connect what I always feel and felt when I'm talking to a client, linked to the data that we have already in a CRM, in a marketing automation tool. And now suddenly you go like, hey, I understand what they're trying to solve. And I don't need a new CDP to find the 200,000 data points. I now know with my persona exercise, there are only 3 or 10. And the rest, are satellite data points. They're just feeding into those 10 main ones. Yeah. So that is the real, I think, step to get into a mode where you can harness a good understanding of your client into your stack, because a stack technology, that's where your data sits. So it's the two things together. And I see a lot of people that, come to me and say, I need an AI-driven CDP. Why? Because we don't have enough data. Yes, you do. You have plenty of data. You just didn't crunch it yet. Yeah, but it's not telling me what to exactly. You're the marketer. You should try to understand what the data is trying to tell you. Because if you open up a CDP, you implement it, it will show you a nice customer journey. And I've done some trainings, with CDP tools. And then my question is always, okay, great. We have this customer journey. It's visualized and it's cool. You see from which point in the funnel they're going to another point, and some people flow back. And now, what does this tell me? What do I know now about the client that I didn't know before? Why are they going back? Is it a piece of content that's missing? Am I not understanding a CTA right? A call to action? That's the real conversation. And only if we understand that point, we'll go into the 4th decade of content, because then we know what to say. And then we can produce that snackable content.
Yeah, and I would add to that. So personas would be a first cornerstone, a milestone to get a good grip on, because you would know all the data points that you need, and that's such a great advice. Maybe you don't need that many data points. Great advice. And I would add to that also business process mapping and optimization. And that has to do, obviously, also with customer experience and customer journey mapping. So before thinking about technology, you have to, go back to the drawing board. And
yes, and it will help you to save, it saves you from buying the wrong software or software you don't need. And that's the most important thing. If you buy or purchase or use one piece of software, tell in one sentence why you need it. And what will break down if you don't use it. Switch it off for a day. This is what startups say, to understand if your tool is sticky with your customer base, switch it off for a day. If you don't get a complaint, start a new business because it's not working. And it's the same here. I mean, and you don't have to switch it off literally. Probably you'll have a downtime every now and then But that's very important. And then what breaks down, what process, or even what revenue will you miss if it breaks down? That is so important. And then you bring it really back to the core of what you really need. Yes, there are 10,000 tools out there, but probably only 5 make a difference for you. And that you can only find by asking this single question. What if we don't have it? What breaks down? What can't we do? And still, then you can purchase a tool for experimentation's sake. So in some cases, we say, please reconfigure your CRM because now it has a new function, after 10 years you implemented it. Update your marketing automation tool and play around with the CDP. The CDP market, by the way, is still evolving. It's not that mature compared to CRM, compared to automation, because it's younger, but play around. So by the time that you have fully harnessed your CRM automation and everything that's linking into that, in the next 3 to 5 years, you're good to go with CDP, and then you will blow everybody away, and then will be a real turbo booster. So yes, start with your CDP today, but don't present it as a cornerstone. Present it as something we're going to play around with, and then we really need to crunch that data to get those data points and fully understand what the client means.
Yeah, starting with a small pilot. That's perfect. And one question that it always comes up, the old and eternal question: build or buy? Because last year MarTech Alliance, our friends at UK, they reported that about 55% of customer data platforms, marketing data platforms, were either custom developed or incorporated into some off-the-shelf solution. So why do you think this still happens? This 55% surprised me. And is it really better to build a tailor-made solution than to buy a best-of-breed off-the-shelf solution?
Very good question. There are 2 aspects to this. Specifically to CDPs, I would say, it's an immature market, a young market, maybe is a nicer way of putting it. It's absolutely great software out there, don't get me wrong. But then there is also, I see some of those CDP initiatives driven by IT. And they're really savvy with that stuff. And they sometimes say, I use a public cloud. And then I can build my own. I can create a golden record. I can make sure we have all the references in place, and then in a data federated way, feed into other systems. So that is a great thing. This is about the maturity of the technology. So that's one aspect. But there's also another aspect of how mature is your company. So if you talk about the hype cycle of Gartner, they apply it to the market at large. And in companies, you also have a hype cycle. So sometimes CRM is maybe not new in the market, but new to your company. And you will go through that same hype cycle. And the idea is about the hype cycle when you're crossing the chasm. So at the bottom and your deepest, depression, as they call it, or valley of despair or whatever, that is the most beautiful point actually to reach. It shouldn't be too low, but make sure that by then you know exactly what you need. That's the time you should start building maybe stuff yourself, because by then those 3 core features I really need, or those 2 modules. I don't need the whole enterprise thing. I just need these 3 things. And then you go out and see, oh, that's interesting. I need A and B. And for A, there's a best of breed, but for B, there's none. And we need to do it ourselves. And we spoke, in our preparation about healthcare and pharma, but also real estate. Those are industries that sometimes come up with their own CDP or their own CRM and say, we have our own, because we're slightly different. So there you see that the maturity in the market also can be adopted in the maturity of or reflected in the maturity of the company. So, and again, here, just like with CDPs earlier, I'm not saying don't ever build. You can play around. And if you talk about build, by the way, in some cases, Google Sheets, or Excel, it's the duct tape of MarTech, some call it. You can play around and do a rapid prototyping and see what you really need, and then go to the market and say, hey, there's a best of breed. So, but really build a CRM, I would do after, crossing the chasm. And before that, I would just play around with, integrations. There's beautiful stuff like iPaaS tools, integration platform as a service, where you can connect different platforms. Play around with that. And then after the chasm, go fully fledged in OutSystems type of solutions, and I see this at companies, but only if you know your requirements well. Otherwise, you're just trying to become a software vendor and not the one that is specific in automotive, but just a software vendor, and that's dangerous. Sorry,
don't run after the train. There's a perfectly established market that is developing, the next generation of CRMs, for instance. Don't go after that train unless unless what you've just said is true. And it's such an interesting view on that. I would also add that if, for instance, your business model depends on that, if your data and your and the relationship with your customers depend on that particular tool, maybe you are better off with a tailor-made tool.
100%, absolutely. And you see this sometimes in the system of records like CRM and automation, but only if you really know what 2 or 3 aspects of such a tool are key for your business. You see it more with systems of differentiation. So that's the next layer. So they those are systems that set you apart from competition. And we're talking about product configurators or dealer locators, those kind of tools that, make you different. There I can imagine that you go for a build in that case.
Yeah. So we're just almost finishing our amazing conversation, and I've been learning so much from you, Frans. Thank you. But I still have one final question. Regarding the growth of this software market and vendors, it's absolutely noticeable, as we've said. But I think that there is still a gap in the market that has to do with how we answer the following question. How can we use these technologies to deliver growth to our business? And we've talked about that, of course, during this conversation. But to me, the answer has 2 sides. I believe that from the customers, the client side, I mean, the end users, the marketing departments and sales, there is an increasing need to have a chief MarTech officer, for instance, or a MarTech or marketing ops that has a clearly defined role and ownership regarding these matters. On the other side, on the supplier side, agencies, consultants, there is a need to have more companies like Liminal and MarTech Tribe, more consultants doing what you and I have been doing. How can an SMB company that is now starting its digital transformation journey achieve success using, with the help of a MarTech consultant?
What I think is, it's of course a knowledge booster, injection and all the experience. So, and what you see happening is that, you mentioned it already, the role of marketing ops, which is not so familiar and common in Europe, but it's the role of that business savvy and tech savvy person, that can translate IT requirements into marketing and the other way around. Those people are invaluable. You really need those, and give them a budget, give them a title, give them a mandate, and then take it from there. And they need to define the guardrails of, okay, this is when we use a tool, and this is when we offboard a tool. So I see, like I said, I don't see a lot of stacks. I see many, collections of software that are not integrated. They don't talk to each other, and the legacy is humongous. So you can't switch them off because there's a lot of data in there. So recently I worked with a supermarket, a retail chain, and they said, from now on, we will, and it's really a big operation. We will set up a team of people that will focus on exactly not only finding the right tools, but also decommissioning them. So implement with decommissioning in mind. That's really where you go into what I call a plug and play architecture. You know, you switch on, switch off stuff pretty easily, not only technically, also data wise. And I think this is a role that IT cannot do, marketing cannot do. This is typically something marketing ops do. And we did some research, and we looked into how many people and companies have a marketing ops team. So in the States, it was over 80%. In Europe, it's 30%. And there were some other additional 30% that have a marketing ops team, but call it differently. And the ratio also differs between one marketing ops person to 5 marketing people. That's what you see in SMB. In the large corporates, it's 1 to 15. So, and that's an interesting rule of thumb. If you want to size up, you know, and build some marketing operation teams and capacity, then those are very important numbers to play with and to see what type of budget you would need to set up such a team.
Yeah, great advice. Friends, this is all the time we have for now. Thank you very much for coming to our podcast. It was a pleasure and an honor to have you here, and I've learned so much with you. Thank you.
Same here. I would like to thank you again, you know, for helping out with the European super graphic and the landscape, finding all those tools. An amazing job. And as you've seen in the super gratitude graph, you are on the top there. So thanks a million. Without you guys, we can't do this. So great stuff.
Thank you, friends. So this was the second edition of Liminal's MarTech Talks podcast. Liminal is the first Portuguese company that specializes in strategic consulting and MarTech operations. We've been helping clients to grow their business through marketing strategies and technologies such as CRM, automation, business intelligence. In this podcast, we will continue to bring you interviews with business leaders that are at the forefront of the digital transformation of marketing and sales departments, so that your business can also grow in this new technological age. Thank you all for being with us today, and we'll see you again at our next episode, which will have none other than Scott Bringer as our guest. So you are all invited. Thank you. Thank you very much.